Okay, we're in our last orientation piece for the course, part 3, and we're going to be looking here at scheduling and structure. So the first thing we're going to look at is schedules for the course, and embedded in this we're going to be looking at course percentage for different assignments, due dates, late penalties, and abscess. Now, this course is developed around modules. Each module is organized around a core statistical concept or process, such as frequency distributions or conditional probabilities. Most of them are a week long, although a couple of the more complex ones go a bit longer. Now, each module consists of assigned readings, warm-up quiz, lecture, discussion board, homework, exam readiness assessment, and then after several modules, the exam. So, within each module, first thing we have is our reading. The assigned textbook is the Essentials of Statistics. When you're looking at your assigned readings, you're going to look at the course schedule. It's posted under syllabus. This basically follows the same pattern as an on-site course, kind of set up with a Monday, Wednesday schedule. So I realize that y'all may be working at different schedules on your own due to other jobs or other scheduling issues. However, this is set up around a Monday, Wednesday, so you can work a little bit ahead if you need to, but don't get too far behind. There's a lot of material, and if you get far behind, it's very difficult to catch up. Now, our warm-up quizzes test reading comprehension. They're due at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the day a new topic is scheduled, and again, you can see that on the course syllabus. They have a 50% late penalty after that due date, up until the close of the associated exam. That is because they're designed to help you with your reading comprehension and getting familiar with the material. That material is tested in the exam, after which at that point the material has been processed and we're moving on to new concepts, so that's not relevant. The warm-up quizzes are worth 2.5% of your course grade. However, you have penalties also for missing them. So if you miss 3, that results in a subtraction of 10% of your possible course points from your overall total course points earned. So that can really hurt you. Also, if you miss 6, it results in an F in the course. That is because these warm-up quizzes, I don't count them for a lot, and you have 3 tries at them so that you can be part of your learning experience. However, because they are part of your learning experience, I need you to complete them. It's part of your repeated exposure to the material and concepts. All right, so and as we can see here, repeated exposure, so that's part of our optimal learning strategies, and this is why you are heavily penalized for missing the warm-up quizzes. All right, lectures. This is my instruction. So this is basically where you're getting your instruction about working with the statistical process, procedures, distributions, and concepts. These are built for my on-site lecture. They include tips, suggestions, and additional tools that I've built. I have a time commitment that's about the same as the on-site, so I time them and they take just about as long to go through as if you were on-site in the classroom. I strongly suggest that as you're going through the lectures, you work through the problems with me, checking your work at each step as we go along. Remember, this connects back with our optimal learning options of experiential learning and effortful learning and helps you avoid the fluency effect. If you're just watching the videos through, it's all going to seem to make sense to you, but that's that fluency effect. When you go to work with the material yourself, you're not going to be able to access those memories because you haven't built it through effortful practice. Keep in mind that skipping the videos is the equivalent to never coming to class. It's going to require more effort on your part and it's going to lower your grade. Don't skip the videos. Discussion boards. Now, discussion boards are working with metacognition level of learning statistics. Metacognition is when you improve your ability to learn or apply information. In this case, it's going to be specifically to statistics and probability theory. So examples of that we have, for example, this first week is reflecting on learning through failure and how we can use that to help improve our comprehension and use of statistics. Later on the semester, we're going to be having one, we're going to be looking at developing a probability decision flowchart. So none of these are specifically about statistical processes and procedures, but more about thinking about statistics and organizing the knowledge that we've been working with. All right, now you do have a discussion board for every single module. Again, you're going to want to see your course schedule under the syllabus. Keep in mind when you have your discussion boards, we have 2 due dates. So the due date that is showing up right now on your Canvas schedule is the due date for the initial post. That means that you must have responded to the prompts by that date. At the end of that date, I'm going to open it back up and set a new due date 2 days later. That's the due date for you to have your conversations and your responses to your classmates. So we have 2 due dates. You're only going to see one on the calendar. If you look at the course schedule, you're going to see it's got two due dates. The first due date's always for the initial posting. The second due date is for the close of all of the conversations. Again, these close at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There are no late options for the discussion board. So let's take a few minutes now and segue over looking at late points and absences so we can understand, for example, why you don't have the late option on a discussion board. All right, we've got two types of absences in this class. One is unexcused. This is any type of absence that you can not provide some form of documentation for. Otherwise, your excused absence is an absence in which you can provide some documentation. Do keep in mind that the excused absence schedule will not be applied until I have a copy of documentation. A verbal agreement is not sufficient. As always, contact me about the need to miss a class as soon as possible so we can explore the optimal ways for you to miss the class and not have it affect you in your grades or your assignments or your comprehension. Okay, late penalties. If you have unexcused absence, your warm-up quiz, you complete for a 50% penalty up until the exam closes. If you look down, you see the same penalty for the homework. So both of those you can complete for up to 50% of the total points before the exam closes. Not optimal, but better than nothing. Now, your discussion board, it's a 0 after the due date. That's because delays in posting your contributions hinders your group's members' ability to complete their work on time. So it's not just your work, it's everybody else's work. Therefore, there is no late options for a discussion board if you have an unexcused absence. Your exam readiness assessment also is a 0 after the due date. That's because we use these to identify areas of confusion as early as possible for optimum intervention. We don't want to wait until 3 days before the exam to find out that you don't understand material from chapter 2. We want to know that as soon as possible so we have enough time to work with it. Therefore, having them completed later after the due date does not meet the learning goals and the requirements of helping us identify the confusion early. Notice with your exams, you have a 0 after the due date. That's a hard 0 because we cannot be coming back and redoing this material. However, I do allow you to make up one exam the last week of the semester. So keep that in mind. If you miss an exam for any reason, you can make it up the last week of the semester. Again, not optimal because we will have been away from that material for a while and it's really hard to come back and take an exam for material that you've looked at over a month ago. But again, it's better than 0. Excused absences. Again, this is if you provide some documentation. Warm-up quizzes, you can complete them up to 3 days after the excused absence date. Your discussion board postings would be exempt. Again, your classmates or group mates will have gone on with their conversations, so I'll simply exempt you from that, although I would really suggest you do the prompts that go along with it because they're part of the metacognition. Your homework is going to be due up to 3 days after the excused absence date as well, and same thing for your exam readiness assessment. Now, for your exams are really hefty and sometimes take a little bit more time to prep for. So here I provide you some extra time. You can complete them up to 7 days after the excused absence date. Now again, that's not optimal. I'd suggest you do it as soon as possible so you don't get too far behind in the other coursework, but you have up to 7 days. Again, be careful, follow the differences for unexcused and excused absence. Always contact me and let me know if you're going to be missing class, and we can explore various options in which you can provide documentation that will allow me to give you the more generous options of an excused absence. Okay, back to our schedule within modules. So we have our discussion boards. Again, we talk about there's no late options here. However, if you have an excused absence, you can't get an exemption. Your discussion boards are also 2.5% of your course grade. Missing 3 of them results in a subtraction of 30 points from your homework grade. Missing 6 of them results in an F in the course. Once again, I have these penalties because you need to be completing this work as part of your optimal learning and your metacognition. Skipping them is not going to help you develop the skill set you need, but I do set them for lower points because we are working with new material there, and just because you're struggling with something, I don't want to have it lower your overall grade. Alright, and of course with the discussion boards, this taps into the learning with others as part of our optimal learning strategies. Okay, notice that your warm-up quizzes and your discussion boards combined are worth 5% of your course grade. This is enough to shift you up a letter grade. So just because they're not worth a lot of percentage points overall, do not neglect them. They are enough to make a difference, and I've set them for that weight on purpose. Homework. Alright, the homework is where you're working through the problems, basically applying the lecture. Keep in mind that within the homework problems, you do have options for getting assistance when you're struggling with difficult problems. Do be sure to see the technology lecture for accessing the assistance tools for that. Homework is due usually about 2 days after the scheduled coverage of the material. Again, say the course schedule. That gives you enough time to process through the lectures, take some notes, work through the problems, have to take a break, come back, maybe check the lecture again for something that you were struggling with, and come back and finish the homeworks. Again, 50% late penalty up until the close of the associated exam. Once the exam closes, we moved on to new learning, so there's not any point in completing that homework as part of the learning goals of the course. Homeworks are worth 30% of your course grade. And again, looking at the working through the problems, homeworks are where we apply a lot of the optimal learning strategies in this course. So you've got your experiential learning with your effortful learning. You've got learning with others, because remember, you are allowed to collaborate with others as you're working through the homework problems. Make sure you check the policies for that. And the learning through failure. So you're not able to accomplish a homework problem you thought you understood, then looking through where you're identifying your problems and using your assistance tools to be able to correct that issue. All right, exam readiness assessment. These are self-tests. They mimic the exam. Okay, so previous students told me that they had a really hard time adjusting from the homework problems, where you have the ability to have it show you a specific example to help you walk through it. You have the ability to email me if you're stuck. You have the ability to access some videos to help you with it. You also have 3 tries on the homework. And lastly, when you're looking at the homework, you can check your work as you're going on in a more complex problem. None of those are in the exam. So, following up on student feedback from previous semesters, I've built the exam readiness assessments at the end of each chapter's material. These are due 1 day after the associated homework is due, against your course schedule. That gives you a chance to finish up that homework, go back and correct any mistakes that you had in terms of your learning and your application, and then go back and be ready to take that exam readiness at your best level. Again, it's due at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Times. No late options, because we need to be able to know early on where you're struggling, and your exam readiness assessment is worth 10% of your course grade. Okay, again, with the exam readiness assessment, we're going to be able, in just a moment when we look at exams and preparation for exams, we can use your performance in the exam readiness assessment to apply the learning through failure optimal part of learning strategies. So just because an exam readiness assessment does not go well, certainly do not neglect that, but also don't panic. We can still use that information to refine your comprehension and understanding, which is going to help you then be able to do better on the exam. And the exam is worth 55% of your course grade. So if you're going to make a mistake, you want to make it in the exam readiness assessments. Okay, now let's take a look at exams. Again, exams come at the end of several modules, so they're not scheduled really within a module, but I just kind of cluster them together because for students, conceptually, when you're working on the warm-ups, the homeworks, and the exam readiness assessment, it's all leading toward the exam. So when we're looking at the exams, these are your assessment of the course comprehension. And as you can see from this figure here, the course information that we're covering is, think of it as kind of the population, that gray area. So you're going to know a lot more information than what is tested on the exam. Those black dots in that figure represent a sample, which is basically the nodule material that's incorporated into the exam. Thus, the exam is a representative measure of the knowledge you've gained in the course. It will not be comprehensive over all material. That would simply be too much for you to complete. So do focus on getting the overall knowledge that you're going to use not only on the exam, but in future classes and in your career. And then the test should tap into that as an accurate assessment of your overall knowledge. All right, now, when we're looking for the exam, first of all, look at their due dates on the course schedule. So you want to check that for each of them. And again, they're going to be showing up on your Canvas calendar. They're due at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Do keep in mind you can make one up the last week of the semester. That is all. And it is worth 55% of your course grade. That is a lot. That is because this is where we're assessing your comprehension. Up until the exam, we are developing, building, and improving your comprehension. This is where we find out how well did you learn the information, and thus it is worth a maximum amount of points in the course. So let's take a few minutes and look at what we can do for exam preparation to help you improve for the exam and optimize your performance there. First, I strongly suggest you rework the exam readiness assessment questions. If you don't do anything else to prep for the exam, do this. See the technology lecture that we have for part 2 for information on how to access your exam readiness assessments for review. Get assistance for any problems that you cannot solve. So if you have exam readiness assessment questions that you cannot solve, use the assistant tools within a similar homework problem, work with your classmates to help solve them, contact myself and or the USF statistics tutor. All right. Now, the next thing you're going to want to do when you're working through the exam readiness assessment questions and you've anchored your understanding of how to solve a problem, the next thing you're going to want to do is develop a set of reference notes. So the exam is open text, open notes. However, you do not have enough time to be flipping through your book, locating each piece of information as you need it. You need to have these already developed. And again, I call these reference notes. So a good set of reference notes is going to be customized. It's going to include definitions and examples, and it's going to have a flow chart of solution steps, formulas, and include a successful sample problem. So let's take a look at what this might look like. So here's an example of notes that I would build, for example, the measures of relative standing section discussing z-scores. So let's take a look at these here. You can see going through these that I've got over here my definitions and my examples. So what are the definitions of the problem? Notice also as you move down, then we have my formula. I've got one for a sample and one for a population. Then we can see going through and looking at this. If you look over to the left, so you can see over here on the right hand side, here's my formula, and then moving across the left, you can see where I actually use that formula to solve a potential problem. So the sample problem I'm solving is a pulse rate of 92 unusual for a woman? Right? And so I use that information that we've got. So I've got woman pulse rates with a mean of 77.5 and a standard deviation of 11.6. I take those and plug that into the formula and go through and get my answer. Okay, and then I culminate this up with looking at my interpretation. So if you look back over at my notes on the right hand side, I've got my interpretation rule that I'm going to use. And then if you look back under the problem, you can see where I applied it. And my answer for this example would be no, it is not unusual because it's within 2 standard deviations from the mean. Now, the other thing you can notice in here is I provide some references to further information in other places. So for example, if I'm solving a problem like this where I'm not given the mean, I'm giving an actual set of data. So I've got a pulse rates for, let's say, 15 women that I'm going to use for setting my criteria. I reference myself to go see my mean notes above for calculating what is going to be the mean for that sample from the data. Similarly, standard deviations, that information is located at a different place, so I'm reminding myself to go get it from that other location. Okay, and lastly, you can see that I've got this customized. So rounding rule, 2 decimals, super important. By the way, rounding rule is where most people make their mistakes. They'll get their numbers right, and when it gets to the rounding rule, they round it incorrectly. This will be a wrong answer when you're entering it. It doesn't matter that you got it correctly out to 5 decimals, but you didn't round it correctly back to the 2 decimals. The rounding rule for z-scores is a 2 decimal. So be prepared. Make sure you've got that included in your information for answering your problems correctly. There's no point in losing that problem when you were that close to being right, but simply didn't round it correctly. Now, lastly, another thing looking at this, notice that I've kind of color coded some of my notes here. So like I've got my X value is all in oranges, both when we're looking at my formulas and we're looking over my example. My means I've done in green and my standard deviations I've done in purple. I suggest you consider using color combinations like that to help distinguish for yourself what part goes with each thing. I personally am a visual kind of person, and so I find that really helpful to have the colors to help me organize my concepts that way. It's up to you, but this is an example of the kind of reference notes that you would want to build for yourself for answering the homework problems, for answering the exam questions with measures of relative standing. Okay, and you should have been able to build this prior to going in and doing your homeworks, then customize them a little bit more, improve them overall through the exam readiness assessment, and then have the finished piece here ready to go in for your exam. Okay, so that wraps up our schedules within each module. Again, you have your assigned reading, warm-up quizzes, lectures, discussion board, homework, you have your exam readiness assessment at the end of each chapter, and at the conclusion of several of the modules, you have your exam. All right. So the last thing we're going to look at here is our schedule across the course. You're going to find this in the module resources to use throughout the course. It's also posted under syllabus in the Canvas site. So it's organized by weeks. As you can see, if you look over here, here's a sample piece of it for the semester. So we've got May 7th through May 11th. The components we have so far is optimal learning strategies, course technology and interface, and schedule and structure. When you're looking at that, you can see that you have a class quiz that is due, and you also have a homework on Pearson for the My Math Lab 0.0. It's an interface homework problem. Those are both due on 5/14. Down below, you notice that we also have some associated discussion forums. So we got 3 discussion forums that are associated. The first one's due on May 12th. That's because I know some people don't wind up getting into the class till near the end of the week, so you need a little time to do that. That's going to be your first initial post responding to the prompts. Then you see May 14th. That's the final due date for all the conversations to be done regarding those topics. And we go down to the next week, so we can see there May 14th through 18th, we're going to be looking at types of data and collecting sample data. There you can see that not only do you have warm-ups assigned for those dates and the associated components, but you've also got your homework due dates, and you've got your exam readiness due date for that one. Notice that following up after your exam readiness assessment, we have a further discussion forum, and in fact there we're going to go back and look at the concepts of learning from failure again, and so forth all the way through. So this is your schedule up until the close of exam 1, at which point we will start the next section of information, which is going to be probability theory. So up till exam 1, we're focusing mostly on data collection and descriptive statistics. All right, now there is some overlap in the modules when you look at the schedule. You can see that sometimes we have a warm-up for the next module may be due before the exam readiness assessment for the previous one. This is to allow time for people to get assistance with difficult homework problems before taking their exam readiness assessment. All right, now we're moving into looking at the basic structure of the course. Here we're going to be looking at policies, grading scales, and effort points. So, policies and structures. Full detail of the policies is in the module resources to use throughout the course, again, and also under the syllabus on Canvas. The majority of these policies I've integrated into the orientation lectures. So we looked at a lot of them when we were looking at optimal learning strategies. We just finished up looking at penalty points and absences, but there's some additional policies that I want to take a look at now. These are inclusion, plagiarism penalties, breakdown of point summary, grading scale, and lastly, something that you don't have perhaps in most classes, but I think is really helpful here, grading for effort. Alright, so inclusion. Obviously this class follows all inclusion policies for University of St. Francis. I will provide all class or test accommodations based on the impact of a documented disability. When we're looking at that, we keep in mind Geneva Burgess is the coordinator of Student Disability Services. There's her phone number and her email. So if you have a disability and it is not yet documented, but you feel that you would benefit from accommodations, do feel free to reach out to her. She will help you get started on the process. If you do have a documented disability, do make sure that you get the letter to me so that I can see the specific accommodations to grant you. Next, we're looking at our Title IX. So Title IX, obviously in this class, I strive to create and maintain a safe and supportive environment that's conducive to the academic achievements and the healthy interpersonal interactions for all students. So that means that everybody in this class is interacting with each other respectfully in a supportive environment. Any type of harassment, bullying, or any type of discrimination is obviously not acceptable. If you have any concerns in this class or elsewhere on campus, report your concerns to a university official, or you can report them to the University Title IX coordinator, Dr. Robert Pastor, and again there you see his phone number and also his room location. Now we come to one of my least part of the class policies, but an essential component, and that is plagiarism. So under the optimal learning lecture, we talked about some of the different ways that you all can learn together appropriately on your homework problems. However, I also specified there that the warm-ups, exam readiness assessments, or the exams are not to be completed in collaboration or assistance or communication with anybody else. These are to be assessments of your own learning. Warm-up quizzes, that's because it's helping you get an idea of your understanding of key concepts. So cheating on those doesn't really help you because it doesn't help you learn where you're missing material. Same idea applies to exam readiness assessments, and obviously on the exam, this is to be a test of your work and your work only. Now we have several plagiarism penalties here at St. Francis. First of all, any offense has to be reported to academic affairs. And keep in mind when we're going through and looking at all of these that plagiarism applies to both the student who claimed the work as their own and any students who facilitated this event. So if you are letting somebody look over your material, or you're sitting there with your exam open, taking your notes, and they're looking at the notes and the steps that you're using to solve your exam problems, although you may not be meaning to help them, you still could find yourself in a very uncomfortable conversation with the Academic Affairs Office regarding how you had facilitated, intentionally or unintentionally, plagiarism. So be very careful here. Any case of plagiarism that I report both students that were involved, or any students. I've never had to deal with a group, but if it occurred, that would be the requirement. So when we're looking at this, our first offense, now this is policy, is that set at my discretion, and I've decided that you get a 0 on the assignment or the exam. After that point, we move into the USF policies. USF says that a second offense is an F for the course, and you meet with the academic support services. Third offense means you get an F for the semester and meeting with the academic chief academic officer. In short, people, plagiarism does not pay here, nor do you need to be able to do it. Okay, so the penalties for plagiarism are very steep. If I have reasons to suspect that you are engaging in plagiarism, I will report you. I don't like to do it. I don't want to do it. However, it is part of my responsibility as a professor in this course. I need to make sure that I maintain a fair environment for everybody to learn in which everybody's comprehension is fairly and accurately assessed. Plagiarism undercuts that, so I cannot tolerate it. Hopefully this will be the last time we ever have to talk about this, and we can move forward focusing on your learning and collaborating to improve our learning together while still being respectful. Final work such as the warm-ups, exam readiness assessments, and exams must be your work and your work alone. Okay, point breakdown summary. So over here on the right, you can see I've pulled this from the full course schedule. The warm-ups, so we have 21 warm-ups. They're at 0.24% each. They accumulate up to 2.5% of your course grade. And as you see, we go down through here in homeworks, our exam readiness assessments, and then our exams. Here's the grading scale for the course. So when you're looking at your grades and you want to know what letter grade you're going to be assigned for a course, this is the scale that you apply. I do round grades, thus a 77.6 will become a C+. A 77.52 is still a C. If you withdraw from the course, you must file the paperwork. Telling me is not sufficient. This is a USF policy. And lastly, up in our policies and structures, we look at grading for effort. Grading for effort is something I've built into this class that acknowledges your increased effort. Students sometimes get off to a rough start in the class or have some type of thing that comes up partway through the class that really undercuts their ability to perform well in the material and comprehend it. So in respect of that, and realizing it takes a lot of effort to pull your grades back up, I've developed some efforts where you can get grade for your effort. So, exam improvements. If your exam performance rises by a letter grade from one exam to another, I'll add 5 points to your overall exam grade. Okay, so for example, you get a D- on exam 1 and a C- on exam 2. You'll notice there's a column for exam effort points, and you get 5 points added onto this. This will apply for increases of up to 2 letter grades. Okay, so you can earn ultimately a total of plus 10 points into your overall exam grade. Course effort. Otherwise demonstrating significant extra effort, such as meeting with myself for assistance, following my recommended actions, meeting with a tutor regularly, anything like this, I will reward at my discretion, adding 0.25 to 2 points to your overall course grade. These now require documentation. So if you're meeting with a regular tutor, I would need documentation from the tutor, such as an email confirming the dates and amount of time that you met with the tutor in order to award you a certain amount of course effort points. Alright, so this wraps up looking at our policies and our structures for the course. And that is the last part of our lecture moving forward in our orientations. So now that you've got your schedule and your structure set, you've completed your optimal learning strategies and your course technology and interface, you should be ready to move on to Module 2, which is going to be beginning to look at data collection and moving into our section on descriptive statistics.